Eduardo Ramirez pressed the button for the 42nd floor elevator while loosening his Italian silk tie. The 1 billion peso contract for the new real estate development in Monterrey was finally closed. His phone vibrated. A message from Valentina reminding him of the appointment with the wedding planner that afternoon. "Mr. Ramirez, you have a call from your mother," his assistant interrupted as he entered the office. "Not now, Patricia. I have to review the trust records. She insists it is urgent." Eduardo sighed as he picked up the receiver. Doña Gloria's voice sounded more serious than usual. "Eduardo, son, have you sent out all the wedding invitations?" "Almost all of them, Mom. Why?" "Your Aunt Cecilia told me something. Is it true that you invited Carmen Ortiz?" The silence lasted for a few seconds. Eduardo turned toward the large window overlooking the skyline of Mexico City. "Yes, I invited her. Why, son? After so many years, is it a gesture of courtesy, Mom?" "Nothing more." Eduardo Ramirez pinched the bridge of his nose. His mother had always had that irritating intuition. "It's my wedding. I can invite whoever I want. The last time I saw her, she was graduating as a teacher, an exceptional girl. She doesn't deserve—" "Mom, I have a meeting. We'll talk later." He hung up and stared out at the city. On her screen, she opened Carmen's Facebook profile, the last photo, her surrounded by children in a classroom. Modest, her smile as authentic as she remembered, so different from the artificial photos Valentina posted on her social networks. The intercom rang again. "Miss Montero is here." Miss Valentina burst in wearing Chanel No. 5 and designer heels. "Honey, you confirmed the final guest list. The planner needs the exact numbers for the banquet at the hacienda." "Yes, I included someone else." "Who?" "Carmen Ortiz." Valentina set her Hermes bag on the mahogany desk. "Your ex-girlfriend from high school? The teacher?" "The same." A mischievous smile spread across her perfectly lined lips. Eduardo kept his expression neutral, but something in his stomach twisted. Carmen's face that last night, when she told him she was going to study abroad, flashed through his memory. "It's just an invitation, Valentina." "Of course, love, just an invitation." Valentina left the office with the same air of superiority with which she entered. Eduardo looked again at Carmen's photo on Facebook. For a moment, the 18-year-old Eduardo, the one who promised to change, the world with her under the stars of Puebla, seemed to judge him from the past. He abruptly closed the page and opened the trust documents. The numbers did not lie, the numbers did not judge, the numbers did not remember broken promises under the stars. The Pujol restaurant was buzzing with the discreet murmur of the capital's elite. Valentina spread out the guest list on the linen tablecloth while Eduardo contemplated his glass of red wine. "The Montero Vega confirmed full attendance," Valentina said, ticking off names with her Mont Blanc pen. "Dad insists on seating the governor at our table." Eduardo unlocked his phone, where the email confirming Carmen's invitation was blinking unread. "Are you listening to me?" Valentina tapped the table with her pen. "The governor can sit wherever he wants. The Spanish ambassador also confirmed. We need to rearrange the tables in the east wing of the hacienda." Eduardo discreetly opened Instagram. Carmen's latest post showed her class. "Putting on a school play. What are you looking at so much?" Valentina leaned over the table. "Work, liar." Valentina snatched the phone from him with surprising agility. "Carmen Ortiz, really?" Eduardo said. "I was just checking to see if she received the invitation." "You know what?" Valentina smiled as she slid her finger across the screen. "We could sit her at the table with my cousins, the twins. They just got back from Paris. They can't stop talking about their shopping on the Rue de Faubourg. Valentina, or better yet, with the Ruiz Pardos. Isabel is wearing her 3rd engagement ring. They'll surely have a lot to talk about." The waiter approached with the main courses. Eduardo cut his guagu with more force than necessary. "Why does it bother you so much?" Valentina pressed. "You invited her." "It doesn't bother me." "So, decided table 16 with the Ruiz Pardos." Valentina wrote something on the list. "Isabel can give you advice on how to get a rich husband," she agreed. Suddenly, One afternoon in high school, Carmen helping him study for the calculus test, sharing sandwiches she'd made herself. "I don't need to be rich," she'd said. "I just want to do something that matters." "I'll put her at table 8, Eduardo declared, "with the businessmen." "Honey, don't be ridiculous, she's my guest." Valentina studied him for a moment, his expression calculating. "Whatever, it'll be more interesting this way." She took a sip of champagne. "You know, we should include her in the Sunday brunch, the day after the wedding, on the terrace of the hacienda." "I don't think she'll stay that long." "Oh, but we have to insist." Valentina pulled out her own phone. "I'll tell Sofia to include her in all the activities. We want her to feel special." Eduardo recognized the tone. It was the same one Valentina used when she planned to destroy a social rival. The waiter cleared away the plates. Eduardo ordered a double whiskey. "By the way," Valentina continued, "Mom suggests we use the family silverware for the head table, the ones they used at my grandparents' wedding in Madrid." Eduardo nodded absently. In his mind, Carmen was still sharing homemade sandwiches in a Puebla schoolyard, her eyes shining with priceless dreams. Antonio Lopez de Santa Ana High School hadn't changed. Eduardo looked at the building from his Mercedes parked in front of the same green gate where he used to wait for Carmen every morning. Nostalgia hit him without warning. September 2004, the first day he saw her. Carmen running down the main hallway carrying a model of the solar system, her uniform impeccably pressed, her hair pulled back in a single braid. "Watch out!" she had shouted, dodging by inches. He helped her pick up Jupiter, which had broken off in the near collision. "I'm Carmen," she said, smiling as she taped the planet shut. "Eduardo, physics with Professor Mendoza." "Yes, are you late too?" From that day on, they studied together in the library. Carmen had a unique way of explaining the most complex problems, relating them to everyday life. "Equations are like cooking recipes," he said. "You just have to follow the steps with patience." Eduardo lit a cigarette, remembering the afternoons on the roof of Carmen's house. His mother, Doña Lupita, always brought them hibiscus water and sweet bread. They made plans, daydreamed. "I want to build schools," he had told her one afternoon. "Not these gray schools, schools with gardens. Laboratories, huge libraries, and I will teach in one of them," Carmen replied, leaning on his shoulder. The scholarship came in his senior year, at Stanford University, full program. Carmen helped him prepare his application, corrected his essays, celebrated more than anyone when he received the acceptance letter. "You are going to change the world," she told him the night before his departure, at the lookout point in Puebla. "Come with me. You know I can't. My family needs me here." They kissed for the last time under the stars, promised to write to each other, to keep in touch. The first few weeks they did. Then Stanford consumed him. New friends, new hopes. Carmen's letters became less frequent, her answers shorter. One day, checking his email, he found a photo. Carmen at her graduation as an elementary school teacher. "I did it," the message said. "And your school's with gardens." He never responded. Eduardo put out his cigarette. His phone vibrated. A message from Valentina. About the wedding menu tasting. At the entrance of the high school, a group of students was leaving, laughing. For a moment she thought she saw Carmen among them, with her model of the solar system and her dreams intact. She started the car. In the rearview mirror, the gray building vanished along with the echo of promises that time had turned to dust. "Miss Carmen! Miss Carmen!" shouted Lucia, waving her notebook. "I've finished my math homework." Carmen put down her chalk and approached the little girl's desk. Benito Juarez Elementary School was vibrating with the energy of 33rd graders solving multiplication problems. "Very good, Lucia." Carmen checked the exercises. "See? When you put the numbers in order, it's easier to solve them." The ceiling fan spun lazily, fighting the May heat. On the walls, educational posters mixed with students' drawings, a map of Mexico, multiplication tables, the solar system they had built last month. "Teacher," Miguel raised his hand, "can you help me with this problem?" Carmen was heading toward him when Rosita, the secretary, appeared at the door. "Carmen, this arrived for you." She held out an elegant envelope. "It looks important." The recess bell rang. The children put away their notebooks with laughter and went out to the patio. Carmen sat at her desk studying the thick paper envelope with gold lettering. "Eduardo Ramirez and Valentina Montero have the honor of inviting you to celebrate their marriage." Her hands trembled, slightly. "Hacienda Las Mariposas, Saturday, July 15th, banquet, dance, brunch the following day." "Bad news?" Rosita asked. "No, just an invitation to a wedding. Judging by the thin paper, it must be someone important." Carmen put the invitation in her bag. Through the window, she watched her students playing soccer with a worn-out ball. Her phone vibrated, a message from her sister, Maria. "Are you home yet? I need your opinion on Anna's prom dress." "I'll be leaving in an hour. I have something to tell you." The afternoon passed between 3-digit divisions and a class on the states of matter. At 2, when the last student said goodbye with a hug, Carmen took out the invitation again and opened her laptop, the one she had bought in installments last year. Google showed her headlines. "Eduardo Ramirez, the new face of construction in Mexico. Grupo Ramirez announces multi-million-dollar project in Monterrey. The 30 most influential people under 40. The photos showed a different Eduardo. Perfect suits, expensive watches, a practiced smile. Next to him, a blonde woman with jewelry that probably cost more than the school's annual budget. Carmen closed the laptop, put the notebooks she had yet to review in her worn-out bag, and turned off the fan. On the blackboard were the day's multiplication problems written in her careful handwriting. As she left, she stopped in the courtyard. The worn-out ball had been forgotten under the jacaranda tree. She picked it up, thinking about buying a new one with her next paycheck. The afternoon sun painted long shadows on the empty courtyard. Carmen took a deep breath, holding the invitation in her purse, like someone holding a fragment of a past she thought she had forgotten. Carmen's apartment smelled of freshly brewed coffee and the sweet bread they bought at Don Tonio's bakery. Maria stared at the invitation on the kitchen table as if it were a bomb about to explode. "Are you going?" she asked, pouring 2 cups of coffee. "I don't know." "You know it's a trap, right?" Carmen ran her finger over the gold letters. The paper was so thin she was almost afraid she would tear it. "Eduardo isn't like that." "The Eduardo you knew wasn't like that." Maria dipped her pussy in her coffee. "Did you see the news? The photos with his fiancée?" Carmen pulled out her cell phone. Instagram showed her Valentina Montero's account. Yachts in Ibiza, fashion shows in Milan, parties in mansions. The last photo, her and Eduardo on the year cover of a society magazine. "All of his rich friends are going to be there," Maria continued. "People who spend on a dinner what we earn in a month." "I don't care about money, I never did." "They do." Maria took the invitation. "Las Mariposas Estate. You know how much a wedding there costs." Carmen's cell phone vibrated, a message from her mother. "Are you coming to dinner on Sunday? Your dad made chilis and nogada. If I don't go, he'll think it affected me." "And it didn't affect you?" Carmen got up to look for more bread in the cupboard. Next to the plates was the photo of her graduation as a teacher, the same one she had sent to Eduardo years ago. "It's been 12 years. So why did he invite you now?" The silence extended between the sisters. Outside, the Puebla afternoon fell on the colonial roofs. "I'll need a dress," Carmen finally said. Maria sighed. "I have the blue dress I wore to Cousin Lucia's wedding. It's very simple. It's elegant." Maria smiled. "And it suits you." "Better than it does me." Carmen looked at the invitation again. The paper still shone under the kitchen light like a promise or a threat. Her phone vibrated again. A photo of her students in the parents' WhatsApp group. "Thank you, Miss Carmen, for teaching them about the solar system. Miguel can't stop talking about the planets." Carmen smiled. This was her life now. Coffee with her sister, chiles and nogada on Sundays, children discovering the universe in a room with a loud fan. I'm going, she declared. Maria stared at her. Are you sure? Yes. Carmen put the invitation back in its envelope because I'm no longer the girl who fell in love with her promises. The sun set behind the Puebla Cathedral, painting the sky orange. Carmen thought about her students, her parents, her simple but meaningful life. On her nightstand, the invitation would wait until July, reminding her that sometimes going back to the past is the best way to confirm that the present is exactly where you should. The luxury events office occupied the penthouse of a building in Polanco. She watched the wedding planner, Sofia Mendez, as she arranged place cards on a model of the hacienda. Table 8 is crucial, Valentina explained. I want the Ruiz Pardos close to the special guest, Carmen Ortiz. Sofia consulted her tablet. The elementary school teacher? Exactly. Isabel Ruiz Pardo will wear her emerald necklace for the first time that night. Sofia nodded, understanding the intention. Diego Montero, the cousin who just bought the vineyard in France, has also confirmed his attendance. Perfect, Valentina smiled. What about Sunday brunch? All arranged, champagne service, crystal from 11. Valentina's phone rang. It was Eduardo. Do you need something? Why did you invite Carmen to brunch? I want her to feel included. Valentina motioned to Sofia, who discreetly walked away. That wasn't the point of inviting her, Eduardo said. Silence. On the other end of the line, Valentina stifled a laugh. Cancel her invitation to brunch. Impossible, it's already confirmed. It would be in bad taste. Valentina, I have to hang up. I'm working on the final details. I love you. Valentina hung up and turned her attention to the model. The Thai orchid centerpieces are confirmed, she asked Sofia, who was returning with more documents. They arrived this morning, also the menus printed on rice paper. Valentina walked over to the window. Below, the city spread out like a reminder of her social dominance. On her wrist, the Cartier Eduardo had given her on their first anniversary glistened in the sun. One more thing, Sofia, Valentina turned. I need Carmen Ortiz's phone number. For what? I want to personally make sure she feels welcome. In her purse, the iPhone already held a list of precise instructions for each guest at Table 8. The fall of a provincial teacher into the midst of the Mexican elite must be a carefully choreographed spectacle. The clock in the Wei Tower struck 5. In 3 hours, she would dine with the wives of Eduardo's partners. She would tell them about the special guest. The pieces were beginning to move. Valentina smiled. In her world, humiliation was an art, and she was a consummate artist. Grandma Remedios's closet smelled of mothballs and memories. Carmen and Maria looked through old dresses while the old woman watched from her rocking chair, petting her cat. That blue one will look perfect on you, Grandma said, as Carmen pulled out a silk dress. I wore it to your Aunt Consuelo's wedding. The dress was simple but elegant, classic cut, knee-length, with a discreet bateau neckline. Try it on, Maria insisted. Carmen looked at herself in the antique mirror in the bedroom. The fabric fitted as if it had been made for her. I have something else too. Grandma stood up with difficulty and walked to her dresser. From a velvet box, she pulled out a necklace of small pearls. Grandma, I can't. Your grandfather gave it to me when we celebrated our 15th wedding anniversary. Her wrinkled hands placed the necklace on Carmen's neck. Pearls don't show off. They shine on their own. Maria held her breath. It's perfect. Grandma adjusted the clasp and took a step away. Now you look like a lady, but without pretensions. Her eyes sparkled mischievously. Let them see that elegance can't be bought. Carmen touched the pearls gently in the mirror. Her reflection showed a confident woman, elegant in her simplicity. Why? Are you really going? Grandma asked, returning to her rocking chair. Because I was invited. Carmen Ortiz. You're not fooling me. I've known you since you were in diapers. Silence filled the room. The cat stretched lazily. I'm going because I need to close that chapter, Carmen finally admitted. Grandma nodded. The pearls are yours. She held up a hand when Carmen tried to protest. It's time for them to be passed on to the next generation. Maria began looking for shoes while Carmen changed. The dress and necklace were carefully stored away, waiting for the wedding day. Before leaving, the grandmother took Carmen's hand. Remember, my little girl, true class is not in what you wear, but in how you hold your head high. The afternoon sun came through the colonial windows, making the pearls shine like promises of dignity. The most exclusive restaurant, a private club in Las Lomas, was buzzing with the murmurs of the capital's elite. Valentina presided over a table of 10 women, all wives or fiancées of the most important partners of the Ramirez group. So you say she was his high school girlfriend? Isabel Ruiz Pardo asked, playing with her new emerald necklace. A very peculiar story. Valentina took a sip of her martini. It seems that Eduardo wants to be generous with his past. Mariana Santos, wife of the main shareholder, leaned across the table. And you say she is an elementary school teacher at a public school in Puebla? Discreet giggles were not long. Incoming. Have you already confirmed her dress? Asked another of the women. From what I understand, it is borrowed. Valentina feigned disdain. An aunt or grandmother, something like that. At another table in the restaurant, Eduardo was having lunch with his partners, oblivious to the conversation. And will you seat her with us? Isabel touched her necklace again, an unconscious gesture of superiority. Table 8, I want you to feel comfortable. Of course. Mariana smiled mischievously. We can talk about our last visit to Paris or my new jewelry collection. Isabel added. Valentina eyed her miso ring, a diamond that had cost more than an apartment. Just remember to be subtle. The waiter served the second round of cocktails. The conversation turned to the latest society gossip. But the topic of the provincial teacher still hung like an expensive perfume in the air. At the other end of the restaurant, Eduardo checked his watch. He had a video call with foreign investors in half an hour. His phone showed a notification. Carmen Ortiz had confirmed her attendance at the wedding. The laughter from Valentina's table reached his ears. For a moment, the weight of what he had set in motion felt like lead in his stomach. He asked for the bill. The laughter continued. The Las Mariposas estate stood out among perfectly pruned gardens, like a postcard from colonial Mexico. From the taxi, Carmen looked at the stone fountains, the centuries-old arches, the stone paths where several Bentleys and Mercedes were already waiting for their owners. Are you sure this is it? The taxi driver asked. Yes. Carmen paid the fare. Thank you. Grandma Remedios's blue dress felt cool against her skin. The discreet but elegant pearls gave her confidence. In her small handbag, the gift, an old book of poetry that she found in a second-hand bookstore. Your invitation, a man in a black suit asked at the entrance. Carmen introduced her. The man consulted a tablet. Table 8, Miss E. Ortiz, this way, please. The main courtyard of the hacienda had been transformed into a dream garden. White orchids twinkled from the arches, floating candles illuminated the central fountain, and white-gloved waiters poured champagne into crystal glasses. The voice of Doña Gloria, Eduardo's mother, cut through the murmur of conversation. How nice to see you. The woman approached, elegant in her wine-colored dress. Her embrace was genuine, warm. You look beautiful, my daughter. Doña Gloria touched the pearls approvingly. Are they family? My grandmother's, Carmen replied. The best jewels always are. As they walked, Carmen felt the glances, the discreet murmurs, the silent assessments. One woman with an emerald necklace was watching her in particular. Table 8 was close to the dance area. Several guests were already taking their places. Carmen, I would like to introduce you to Isabel Ruiz Pardo and her husband. Mrs. Gloria introduced them. And this is Diego Montero, cousin of the bride. Carmen greeted them with a serene smile. Her experience handling parent meetings had taught her to maintain composure in any situation. We have heard a lot about you, Isabel commented, her emerald necklace shining in the light. I hope good things. Fascinating, Valentina smiled. Is it true that you are a teacher? Isabel asked before Carmen could answer. A collective murmur announced the arrival of the bride and groom. Eduardo, impeccable in his tuxedo, escorted Valentina, resplendent in her designer dress. Their eyes met. For an instant, 12 years of distance were condensed into a second. Carmen held her head high, remembering her grandmother's words. The pearls on her neck sparkled with their own light, while the clink of glasses and elegant conversations floated in the air. "And what is it like to teach in a public school?" Isabel asked, her voice sweetly venomous. "Must it be so rewarding?" "It is," Carmen smiled casually. "One of my students recently won the Tate math contest." "And what about private schools?" Another guest interrupted. "Yes, Miguel has a natural talent for numbers." "Fascinating." Isabel adjusted her collar. "Although I suppose the budget must be a constant challenge." "Sometimes money isn't the answer," Carmen replied. "Commitment and passion for teaching are priceless." Diego Montero smiled, genuinely impressed. "Would you like to dance, Miss Ortiz?" he asked. "It would be my pleasure," Carmen agreed, as they made their way to the dance floor. Valentina gripped her glass so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She wasn't the one who should feel out of place, she muttered under her breath. On the dance floor, Carmen moved with natural grace, her genuine laugh contrasting with the studied smiles around her. The pearls on her neck sparkled under the garden lights like stars that refused to be overshadowed by the most expensive jewels. Doña Gloria found Carmen in the side garden of the hacienda, where the high bougainvillea created a refuge from the bustle of the party. "You needed some air, didn't you?" Doña Gloria sat down on the cantera bench. "Me too," Carmen nodded, grateful for the moment of calm. "You've grown a lot, Carmen," Eduardo's mother observed her attentively. "You are no longer that girl who studied in my kitchen." "Many years have passed," Carmen replied. "Eduardo has changed too." Her voice was tinged with sadness. "Sometimes I wonder if for the better." The sound of music reached. Her corner muffled. A moth fluttered near the flowers. "Why did he really invite me?" Carmen asked. Doña Gloria sighed. "My son got lost along the way. The money, the power." She paused. "I think he wanted to prove something to himself by bringing me here, showing you what he became. But I think he didn't expect to find the woman you are now." Across the garden, Valentina was looking for Eduardo. She found him in his makeshift office, checking emails on his phone. "Your mother is conspiring with her," he accused, closing the door. "Did you see her? Acting like she's one of us?" Eduardo put his phone away. "She's a guest, Valentina. She's a public school teacher. Did you see how Diego looked at her? How everyone falls for her act of humility? It's not an act." Eduardo was defending her. In the garden, Carmen and Mrs. Gloria continued their conversation. "Do you know what Eduardo told me?" Mrs. Gloria recalled. "When he entered Stanford, he asked to build schools with gardens and libraries." Carmen smiled wistfully. "I remember now he builds shopping malls and office towers." A gust of wind stirred the bougainvillea. In the distance, the photographer called the guests for group photos. "I have to go back," said Carmen, getting up. "Carmen!" Doña Gloria took her hand. "Thank you." "Why?" "For showing my son what could have been and what is." In the office, Valentina stormed out, leaving Eduardo alone with his thoughts. Through the window, he could see Carmen, returning from the garden, her blue dress gently moving in the night breeze. His mother's words echoed in his mind. What could have been, and what is. The colonial chapel glowed with hundreds of candles. Valentina walked down the center aisle, her Italian designer dress rustling against the marble floor. Eduardo waited at the altar, his expression unreadable. Carmen, from her place in the fifth row, observed the scene with serenity. The book of poetry she had brought as a gift weighed heavily on her lap. The priest began the ceremony. As he spoke the words about love and commitment, Carmen remembered another promise made years ago under a starry Puebla sky. "We will build something important together," Eduardo had said, "something that makes a difference." Valentina's vows were perfect, studied, Her diamond ring caught the light of the candles as she promised eternal love. Eduardo took his turn. For a moment, his gaze shifted to the fifth row. Carmen held his gaze serenely. There was, no reproach in her eyes, only a quiet certainty. I, Eduardo Ramirez, her voice wavered imperceptibly. Doña Gloria, in the first row, clenched her handkerchief. At that moment, a child began to cry in the chapel. Carmen smiled instinctively, her teacher reflex kicking in. The embarrassed mother tried to calm the little boy. Eduardo continued his vows, but something had changed in his expression. Perhaps it was the child's crying, or Carmen's natural smile, or the weight of the promises echoing. Through the centuries-old church, the priest pronounced them husband and wife, Valentina beaming with triumph as applause filled the chapel. Carmen sat still as the crowd rose, her hand caressing the worn cover of the poetry book, thinking of her students, of her own promises kept. As the couple passed by their row, Eduardo looked back at her. This time he looked away first. The chapel bells rang, announcing the union. In her pew, Carmen breathed deeply. Some promises are broken, she thought, so that more important ones can be kept. The hacienda's gardens had been transformed by the twilight. Hundreds of hanging lights created an ethereal atmosphere over the tables arranged around the central fountain. At table 8, conversation was unexpectedly flowing. Diego Montero had abandoned his initial aristocratic pose. "So I used the solar system to teach fractions?" he asked, genuinely interested. "Yes," Carmen delicately cut into her steak. "I explained to them that if the Earth's orbit is a x unit, we can calculate the proportions of the other orbits." Isabel Ruiz Pardo watched the interaction with growing irritation, her emerald necklace forgotten. "Fascinating." Diego leaned closer. "My foundation supports educational projects. Perhaps we could—" "Diego, dear," Valentina's voice cut into the conversation. "You're needed at the head table." Carmen took advantage of the interruption to observe the surroundings. At the head table, Eduardo was barely touching his food. Doña Gloria, sitting next to him, was having a tense conversation with Valentina's mother. "More wine, miss?" a waiter offered. "No, thank you," Carmen replied. Isabel found her moment. "The wine isn't to your liking, is it? It's a Chateau Margaux from '82, it's excellent." Carmen smiled. "But I prefer to keep a clear mind." "Of course you must not be used to such select wines," Isabel said. "My father taught me that the best wine is the one shared with good company." Carmen kept her tone friendly. "Price is secondary." Others at the table nodded discreetly. Isabel was left without a reply. At the head table, Valentina followed the exchange with a furious look. Her plan to humiliate the provincial teacher crumbled with each elegant response, with each gesture of genuine dignity. "Your ex-girlfriend is hogging all the attention," said an older partner passing by Eduardo. "How refreshing to find authenticity at these events." Carmen said goodbye to Diego with a kind smile and headed toward her table. Her step was light, like someone with a clear conscience. Her grandmother's pearls sparkled under the garden lights, silent witnesses to a victory no one had anticipated. The first stars were appearing over the hacienda when Carmen decided it was time to leave. She picked up her small bag and the poetry book she hadn't yet handed in. "Are you leaving so soon?" Diego approached worriedly. "It's barely 11. Tomorrow I have to prepare the classes for the week. Let me call you a car." "Thanks, but I already called a taxi." Isabel, who had been listening to the conversation, couldn't contain herself. "Aren't you staying for brunch tomorrow?" "Sundays are for the family," Carmen replied simply. "My mother makes chiles en nogada." She headed toward the main table to say goodbye. Valentina barely glanced at her, busy with a group of photographers. Eduardo stood up automatically. "Thank you for the invitation," Carmen said, handing him the book. "I wish you all the happiness." Eduardo took the package, knowing the poetry form like the books they shared in the school library. "I'll walk you out," Doña Gloria offered, anticipating any response from her son. As they walked through the illuminated garden, Eduardo's mother linked her arm with Carmen's. "Come back to visit me," she whispered, "without all this paraphernalia." "I will." At the entrance, the taxi was already waiting. Carmen hugged Doña Gloria with genuine affection. "You are exactly who you always were," the lady said. "And that, my child, is worth more than all my son's millions." Carmen smiled, touching her grandmother's pearls one last time. The taxi pulled away. Through the window, she saw Eduardo in the distance, the book of poetry still in his hands. For a moment, their gazes met. There was no rancor in Carmen's eyes, only the serene certainty of someone who has chosen their path well. The hacienda was lost in the night, its lights fading like a mirage. Carmen closed her eyes, thinking of her students, of the cardboard planets that awaited her in the classroom, of the chiles en nogada in the morning. The taxi driver looked at her in the rearview mirror. "Good party?" he asked. "Instructive," Carmen replied, smiling. The stars shone over Puebla, the same stars under which two young people had once dreamed of changing the world. One of them, at least, was succeeding, one student at a time. The poetry book sat on the mahogany desk in Eduardo's office, untouched, accusatory for 3 days. Finally, he opened it. A note fell from between its pages. "To remember that the most valuable dreams are those we build day by day. Congratulations, Carmen." The marked poem was one by Pablo Neruda that they used to read together in the school library. His phone vibrated. Another message from Valentina from their honeymoon in the Maldives. Photos on yachts, cocktails at sunset, new jewelry. Eduardo closed the app and searched for Benito Juarez Puebla Elementary School on his browser. The web page was, simple, almost rudimentary. Photos of children presenting science projects, an art festival, the work of Don Quixote. In one image, Carmen was explaining something in front of a blackboard, her expression the same as when he taught her calculus, patient, passionate, genuine. "I'm interrupting." Mrs. Gloria entered unannounced. "No, not me." Eduardo closed the laptop. "Do you need something?" "Diego Montero called. He's going to finance a science lab at Carmen's school." Eduardo remained silent, processing the news. "Do you know what one of your business partners told me at the wedding?" His mother continued. "That there's a need for more teachers like that in the private schools where their children go." "Mom, your office towers are impressive," Eduardo replied, "but she builds futures." Doña Gloria walked over to the desk and picked up the book of poetry. "Have you read it?" "You shouldn't." She put it back on the desk. "Sometimes we need others to remind us of who we wanted to be." Eduardo looked out the window of his office, 42 stories above the city, surrounded by glass and steel, so far from the schoolyard, where he shared sandwiches and dreams. His mother headed for the door. "Carmen teaches tutoring on Saturdays," she said before leaving, "in case you ever want to remember what it feels like to build something that really matters." Silence filled the office. On her screen, the school page was still open. Smiling children surrounded Carmen in front of a solar system, made of recycled materials. Eduardo opened the book of poetry again. Neruda's words spoke of simple dreams, of daily victories, of the beauty in the authentic. Outside, Mexico City continued its frenetic pace, but for the first time in years, the noise of ambition was overshadowed by the echo of an old promise: "We will build something important." 6 months after the wedding, the courtyard of the Benito Juarez Elementary School was bustling with activity. Workers were installing equipment in the new science lab while children watched excitedly through the windows. Carmen was reviewing the plans with Diego Montero when she noticed the black Mercedes parked in front of the school. Eduardo got out of the car, dressed but uncomfortable, with a folder in his hands. "Good morning," he greeted, approaching. "I'm interrupting." Diego exchanged a glance with Carmen and discreetly excused himself. "What are you doing here?" Carmen asked. "I have a proposal." Eduardo opened the folder. "The Ramirez Foundation wants to start a scholarship program for public school students, training for teachers, equipment." But he paused. schools with gardens and huge libraries. An almost imperceptible smile appeared on Carmen's lips. Why? Because someone reminded me who I wanted to be. From the nearby classroom came the voices of children reciting multiplication tables, the same classroom where a cardboard solar system still hung from the ceiling. We don't need charity, Eduardo assured. Her. It's not that, it's redemption. Carmen looked around the courtyard where Miguel, her math student, was excitedly explaining to his classmates how the new microscope would work. You'll have to present the project to the school board, he said finally, and follow official procedures. I know. A group of kids ran past them, chasing a new ball. Diego's lab wouldn't be the only change at school anymore. Does Valentina know about this? No, we're getting divorced. Did Eduardo? Answer? Just? Carmen nodded, without surprise or judgment. Support classes are on Saturdays at 9, she said, turning toward the building. If you really want to remember what it feels like to build something important. Eduardo watched her silhouette walk away. The same sure step, the same quiet dignity. On her neck, her grandmother's pearls sparkled in the morning sun. The children continued reciting multiplication tables in the courtyard. Miguel had gathered a group and was explaining physics concepts to them with rocks and leaves. Eduardo loosened his tie and put away the folder. Some dreams, he thought, take detours before finding their way back. The black Mercedes pulled away, leaving Benito Juarez School behind. But this time it wasn't a farewell. It was a new chapter. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on the videos. Your support allows us to keep sharing impactful and emotional stories. Thank you for being a part of this community.